Hey guys, it's Zach here again from Scenic Sights and Bites. Today I'm going to take you through one of my favorite food items in the world, and that is pizza. I love pizza. Now, when you're doing keto, pizza isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do. Now, sure, in the past, I've had a couple of slices of pizza with some friends or family, and I've just eaten the toppings off it, and then you throw away the crust. It's not as filling, it's kind of wasteful. So this is a great alternative. This is keto Fathead Pizza, okay? So I'm gonna show you the full steps from the beginning to the end of how I make this pizza. We're gonna go through making the fathead dough. We're gonna bake that in the oven, and while that's baking, we're gonna make a nice sugar-free pizza sauce, and then we're gonna dress it all up and turn it into an actual pizza. So stay tuned, stay with us. If you're new to the channel, welcome to our channel. Hit that red subscribe button and ding that bell so you get notified whenever we come out with a new food or travel or even wine video. And click the thumbs up, make a comment, do whatever you like to. Just stay tuned, and we're gonna start right now. Okay, so I've got all the ingredients ready to make our fathead pizza dough. Okay, and so what have I got? Well, I've got some mozzarella cheese. This is actually 1.5 cups. I've got 1/8 cup of Parmesan cheese, and I've got 2 tablespoons of cream cheese from a block. So this is a 3-cheese fathead pizza dough. There's lots of different kinds out there, but they're all pretty similar. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is combine the cheeses. We're going to just give it a real quick mix. It's not going to mix really well because everything is in a solid state. Okay. And you want to do this in a microwave safe bowl because we're going to be softening this up in the microwave. You can also soften it up over a double boiler if you prefer. Okay, so I'm just going to move those out of the way. The other ingredients we have, I've got 1 beaten egg over here. I've got 3/4 cup of almond flour, and I've got 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. You can obviously change the seasonings up to suit your taste. That's just what I use. Okay, so I'm gonna go and pop this in the microwave. We're gonna microwave it in a couple of different steps. I'm gonna microwave it for about 45 seconds first. Take it out, give it a good stir. I'm gonna add the dry ingredients, and I'm gonna microwave it again just to get it nice and soft before I add the egg and roll it out. So while that's microwaving, one of the things you wanna do is get your oven preheated to 400 degrees. And what else can you do? Well, when I'm cooking, I like to sometimes enjoy a glass of wine. I make wine. Now, I make wine from a kit. I don't make it from scratch, but there's some really good wine kits out there. And this wine in particular is from my Merlot wine that I made there earlier in the year. So if you want to know exactly how to make wine, if you've ever been interested, I've actually got a video out on that. And you can make some really fantastic wine from these wine kits at a fraction of the price of buying wine. So something to consider. Anyways, let's go check on that stuff. It should be done now. Okay, so 45 seconds in the microwave. Let's get it soft. We're gonna mix that up a little bit better. You want the 3 cheeses to blend together as much as possible. They don't have to be perfect just yet, because it is going back in the microwave. I'm going to take the dry ingredients and just mix them all together, because you want everything to be blended really nice. If there's any lumps in your almond flour, you want to get rid of those as well. In fact, if you have a sifter, it's not a bad idea to sift your almond flour, or any flour really, but the almond flour does tend to clump up. So you want to really make sure that you've eliminated all of those clumps. Okay, so I've got those dry ingredients mixed. Add them to the cheese. And it's not going to mix really well at this point. We're just going to get it started, okay? And the reason we do it this way, or the reason I do it this way, is you only have so much time when it comes out of the microwave before that cheese starts to solidify again. So doing it this way really helps to make sure that you're going to get a nice even mixture. Okay. So that's not too bad. I'll just put that aside. I'm going to go microwave that for another 45 seconds or so. Now I should add, you want to have some parchment paper ready to go to roll this out on, so that as soon as it's ready to go, you're ready to go. You'll need 2 sheets of parchment paper, a little bit bigger than the size of the pizza pan that you're going to be using. And this part here, depending on your microwave, you may need to microwave it a little bit longer, but you want to do that all before you add the egg. You don't want to cook the egg at this stage. Okay, so I'm going to put it in for about another 15 seconds. And then I'll do the rest by hand after that. All right, here we go. That's looking better. Perfect. Okay. Okay, so it's hot. As soon as it's at the temperature where you can do it by hand, you're going to want to knead it by hand. Add that egg now. You can also use a food processor. I find it's not really worth the mess. All right. If it's too hot, you can let it cool down a little bit, but you still want it to be warm enough to really let everything blend really well. Squish it, let it squish right through your fingers, get it mixed up really, really good. Perfect. Okay, now we're gonna drop that ball onto some saran wrap, plastic wrap. Just wrap it up. We're just gonna put it in the fridge for about 5 minutes to let it cool off a little bit. So once you make this recipe, tell me what you thought of it, okay? I want to know what you did differently, if you made it exactly the same, what toppings you used. On this pizza, I'm going to be using pepperoni and bacon. You can use any toppings you want as long as they're carb friendly. And by the way, speaking of carbs, if you do enjoy a glass of wine while you're cooking, make sure you're remembering to count the carbs that are in your wine. Okay, so while that dough is chilling, we're going to make the pizza sauce. And this pizza sauce you can refrigerate for up to about a week, or you can put some in the freezer if you're not going to be having very many pizzas. So what do we have here? We've got 1 can of tomato paste. Okay. Spread that out. We're going to add a tablespoon of olive oil. Mix those together. Then we're going to add the spices. In here I've got some oregano, thyme, salt, pepper, garlic powder, and onion powder. For the exact amounts, just have a look at the recipe in the link in the description, or experiment and find the ones you like. And actually we can add the sweetener at the same time. So rather than using sugar, I've got 1 teaspoon of Swerve, but if you have a different sweetener that you prefer to use, you can experiment with that as well and see how much you need to make it taste the way you want. Okay, now we got to add some water. Okay, you're going to want to add the water slowly because you don't want it to end up being too thin. So we'll just add a little bit at a time, about a 1/4 cup at a time, and mix it up. And this part here is really a matter of your preference, how thin or thick you want your pizza sauce to be. I was once asked why I don't put the macros in the description of the video, saying how many carbs and fats and all that. And that's because every ingredient is so different. You buy this brand of something, you buy that brand of something, it just changes everything. So I find it easier just to go with what works for me. And then when you go to make it, have a look at the recipe, check out your ingredients. You can tell from there what you're going to be looking at for your carbs, your fats, your calories. I just don't want to be the one to lie to you. Say, oh yeah, this is only 3 grams of carbs, and it turns out to be 5. You get to lie to yourself instead. Okay, so that's about the consistency that I like it. And I used, I used about 3/4 of a cup of water. Okay, so I'm just going to put that aside. Now we're going to get ready to roll it out. Roll in between parchment paper. Now here's a trick. If you take a very lightly dampened paper towel or towel and set your parchment paper on it, it'll prevent your parchment paper from running around on you. So I've got 2 pieces here. And, they do want to curl up once they start getting wet. See my struggles? So it's still a little bit warm, which is fine, but it's not as warm as it was before. So I'll just set it down there. Looks good. Smells good. I wish we had smell-o-vision. Okay. So I'm just going to kind of push this down by hand, get it started in between the 2 pieces of parchment. I've got my pizza pan here as a reference. It doesn't have to be exact. And you're going to roll it out to, I think it works out to be about 1/4 of an inch thick. And, if you don't have a rolling pin, I've also just pressed it into shape by hand too. And that works well as, that works pretty good as well. Nice and even. I think that'll probably do it. It's a little bit thin on the edges here, so I'm just going to fold those up. Okay, so the next step is pretty important. You want to take a fork and prick it all over. And the reason being is these fathead doughs can sometimes form bubbles, and you can end up with quite a large bubble. It's not going to cook very evenly. I've heard there are tools you can use to just kind of roll along that make holes for you. I don't have one of those. So I have to do this. And then we take the whole thing, parchment paper and all, slip it onto your pan. And if you need to adjust it a little bit in the pan, you can. There's a little spot there where I had a bit of a hole. I'm just going to fix that. It does not go all the way to the edge of the pan perfectly all the way around. That doesn't matter. It's kind of a work of art here. So now, before we put any toppings on, we have to bake this. So we're going to put this in the oven, 400 degrees for 10 minutes. Okay, 10 minutes is up. Pull that out. Now, we're not done yet. Okay, you're going to want to take your pizza. You're going to want to flip it before you put the toppings on. Sit still like that. Okay. And that's the side we're going to put the toppings on. Okay, so we're just going to let it sit for about 5 minutes to cool off before you do anything else with it. Okay, so we're ready to assemble the pizza. And hey, if you haven't already done so, why don't you give this video a thumbs up if you like it? Feel free to leave a comment. And don't forget to hit subscribe. All right, so I've got my sauce on. Now I've got a blend of pizza mozzarella and cheddar. I can go with straight mozzarella, you can go with straight cheddar, you can do whatever you want. Okay, this is your pizza. And the order you put your ingredients on and what you put on, again, is entirely your preference. Now this is a pepperoni and bacon pizza that I'm doing. That just so happens to be my favorite. It also happens to be my son's favorite. Both of them, I think. Actually, I've got two sons. I've got one who's a young man now. He's 21, and I've got one who's 13. And they both like pepperoni and bacon pizza. And I've got to tell you, they don't do keto. So this is really tough because when I make this, sometimes they try and steal it on me, which isn't really fair because I can't eat their pizza. So it's kind of a one-way street when it comes to sharing. I've got my bacon down, put a little bit more cheese on. I like it when my bacon is mixed in with the cheese. The amount of cheese you put on is entirely up to you. Remember, the more cheese you use, the more fattening it is, the greasier it can be. And there's already a lot of cheese in that crust, so you don't want to forget that. Okay. And finally, the pepperoni. And I make these pizzas enough that I buy larger packs of pepperoni slices and just split them up. I think I've got about 18 slices or so per baggie. That looks pretty good, I think. I'm going to put that in the oven for about 8 minutes or so. Okay, just use that to lift it up a little bit. Take a look at that. So the cheese is nice and melted, the crust isn't burnt, and the pepperoni is starting to curl. You know it's nice and cooked. What I'm going to do, actually, is transfer this to the cutting board. Now, my cutting board's not quite the same size as the pizza, but it's close enough. I'm just going to cut it. You can use a knife, you can use a pizza cutter, whatever you've got, it should work fine. And I like to cut this into 6 pieces. You can cut it into however many you want. If I think I'm going to have to share this with my kids, I'll cut it into 8. That way they think they're getting a full slice, but they're really getting less. I love my kids, but I got to say, they have no problem stealing my food when it tastes good. Okay, I'm just going to take one slice here. Holds up pretty well, and part of that has to do with because we flipped the crust. Let's take a bite. I love it. I can eat a pizza on keto or on Atkins or whatever you're doing for low carb. It tastes really good, and it's not too high in carbs. Now, it's best eaten when hot, when it first comes out of the oven. But this is probably 3 meals, so it does refrigerate well. You don't have to worry about that. I hope you enjoyed this video. On behalf of Callie and myself, Zach, we'd like to thank you for watching us, and we'll see you next time in one of our food or travel videos. Take care. Gotta have another piece.